I almost I felt like I was about to faint. Like I felt like every pore on my face was just open and sweaty. Hello everyone, I hope everybody had a safe, fun, and amazing New Year's. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about nursing school. For those of you guys who know me personally know that I'm in nursing school. For those of you guys who don't, I just finished nursing school probably about 3 weeks ago. Sad moment because I'm going back in 2 weeks and I already have reading assignments. So fun. But yeah, I just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about my experience and answer any questions that I get asked very, very frequently in regards to nursing school. Maybe you're planning on applying to nursing school, maybe you are in nursing school, or maybe you're just curious. You are welcome too. So yeah, this video is probably going to take a little while, so I apologize that it's kind of lengthy, so let's get right into it. To start off, I'm going to talk about how my school is kind of structured, just to give you guys a little bit of background. Just like most nursing schools, if not all of them, my classes are all picked. I have no say in what day, what time, what classes I want to take. They're just all prerequisites for the classes that I'm going to be taking next semester. So with that being said, in order to pass each class and move on to the next semester, I need to have at least a 72 average. I know for most nursing schools it's 75. From my personal nursing school, it is 72 to help a homegirl out. You know what I'm saying? Because nursing school is hard. So now that we got that out of the way, my schedule. This past semester, I took 4 classes. On Mondays, I took Patho and Assessment. On Tuesdays, I took Pharmacology and Fundamentals of Nursing. And on Wednesdays, like at the beginning, first month and a half, we had Concepts Lab. So that prepared us for clinical that we would have for the rest of the semester, because my program does have clinicals our first semester, which is really, really scary, especially when you have no idea like what you're going to be able to do, because it's your first semester, like you're learning all the basics and stuff. But that lab for the month and a half was just preparing us for that clinical that we were going to have later on. And then on Thursdays, I had assessment lab. So, starting with Patho. Patho is just the study of diseases, everything that you want to know about diseases, like the signs and the symptoms of it, how it's diagnosed, how it is treated, what kind of person is more likely to have this disease, etc., etc. For this class, my experience wasn't as bad. It was actually pretty straightforward. The exams were more knowledge-based rather than critical thinking, which is what nursing school is basically known for. So I don't really have much to say about that class, honestly. It was just pretty straightforward. We had, I believe, 4 or 5 exams in that class, and I made A's on all of them except for one I got a B on. So I made an A in the class overall. And the final was not cumulative, so thank God it was not. But I started off with the easy class because the next 3 are definitely not like that. So the next class was assessment. Everything that I just said about Patho is the complete opposite for assessment. Like for Patho, you could probably get away with studying 2 days in advance, 3 days in advance if you want to, and still make an A. For assessment, however, and for the rest of the classes that I'm going to mention later on in the video, you had to study like a week in advance for every test. So with assessment, that's exactly what I did. We had 3 tests in that class and 1 final, which was the HESI final, and those finals just prepare you for the ultimate goal of you getting and passing your NCLEX licensure exam. So for assessment exams, we had 6 chapters for each exam, and each exam was 60 questions. So that means that roughly, you'd have 10 questions from each chapter on the exam. So, that doesn't seem that bad and all that stuff. No, these chapters were like hardcore detailed, and the exams were like, you had to read in between the lines in order to get the answer. So basically what assessment is, Assessment is, which I should have started with that, but assessment is basically where we would learn how to assess a patient. So if a patient were to come in to whatever setting that you're working at and state that maybe they have a headache, you'd know what questions to ask, and from then on you'd know how to intervene. You'd probably get a good idea of their medical diagnosis, and from then on you can come up with your nursing diagnosis and try to make them better. So that's what that class was all about. In order to make it simpler for you guys who are not yet in nursing school, it is basically where you learn how to take vital signs, and you learn how to inspect a patient, palpate and percuss and listen with your stethoscope to check for any abnormalities and things like that. So at the beginning of the semester, they had told us that you had to read the chapters at least 7 times in order to get an A in the class. 7 times each. You're reading 6 chapters, you need to read each one of them 7 times in order to make an A in the class. We're all thinking, oh yeah, totally, there must be another way of studying for the class. No, there was not another way to study for the class. Like, that was how you had to study for the class. So I studied for that class a week in advance, and for the rest of the classes that I'm going to mention, you have to study like at least, well, I would recommend that you study at least a week before for those exams, at least for my school. The first textbook I had ever read was for this class, so I did that. Well, I didn't read it 7 times, oh my god, no. In a week's time, because I would study a week in advance, I was able to fit in reading that book 5 to 6 times for each test. For that class, we also had case studies. That was like 10% of our grade. So a case study is basically when they give you like a scenario of a patient and they give you questions that you have to answer. For example, it'll ask you what kind of questions would you ask this patient in order to figure out what they have or what the problem is. They'd ask you to make a problems list. They'd ask you to make 2 nursing diagnoses from the list that they gave you. So it was not that bad. It was pretty straightforward. They're supposed to help your grade, so it definitely did in my case. So I ended up with an A in assessment. It was definitely a lot of material that you had to know because those chapters are so dense. 6 chapters may not seem like a lot, but some of those chapters were actually very lengthy. The next class that I have for you guys is Fundamentals of Nursing. So that class was a little bit more general. Along with assessment, this one also had a HESI exam that we had to do at the end of the semester. But this class was basically about a lot of different things. It was just like over spirituality and loss and grief and laws, ethics, nursing theory, and lab values, acid-base balance, just a whole bunch of stuff. It was just a wide spectrum of it. But I feel like the message that I got from the class at the very end of the semester is that it's mostly like you viewing the patient as someone more than just a medical diagnosis. You have to make sure that they're mentally healthy, they're spiritually, connected with whatever they believe in. You have to make sure that they're emotionally stable, and all of those parts play a role in how well the patient will recover. And that's our ultimate goal, right? As a nurse, you want to make sure that your patient fully recovers and things like that. So that class was basically just us being there for the patient in multiple dimensions, because people are made up of a whole bunch of different sides put together. So with that class, it was pretty easy. Not gonna lie, I would still study for a week in advance for that class just because it was so much information. Just because it was easy does not mean that there was not a lot of information. I mean, there were stacks of PowerPoints for that class that we had to learn for the exams. And we had like 60 questions, multiple choice, and 10 questions that were free response. So that kind of scared me a little bit because I was like, oh my god, what are they gonna ask me? But no, like that class was pretty easy. I maintained a 90 throughout the entire semester, but then the NCLEX came along and it dropped my grade down to an 89. So I ended up with a B in that class. For fundamentals, I would just recommend that you get one of those NCLEX HESI preparation books. That one was a little bit tricky to me. Like, all the answers seemed right, and that's when I understood that's where all the memes come from on Facebook and on Instagram, like, of how all the answers are going to be right and they sound right, but there's only one that's the right answer, and so it's just like, dang. So I definitely recommend that anybody gets that book for fundamentals if you just want to secure your A and things like that. So do that. For that class, we also had case studies along with assessment. So that was also, I believe it was either 5% of our grade. So like assessment, it was supposed to help our grades. It wasn't that bad, honestly. So next, pharmacology. Pharmacology, in my experience, it was the hardest class. So basically, pharmacology is learning a whole bunch of drugs, and I mean tons and tons of drugs. It would blow your mind. I mean, antidysrhythmics, antibacterials, antifungals, cancer treatment drugs, a whole bunch of different drugs. The best way that I can describe how this class felt is just imagine you're going to a foreign country where you have no idea what their language is, and you're trying to process like what they're saying, but you can't because you obviously don't know the language, so it's just sound. That's exactly how pharmacology felt. Like, it was just learning a new language to me, honestly. Those freaking drug names are just foreign to me and it was really hard to pronounce them. It was really hard to distinguish them from one another. So you kind of had to make like these individual storage files in your brain to try to just keep them all sorted out. But it was pretty challenging for me just because of that. A lot of them sounded the same, but our teacher showed us tips and tricks on how to distinguish them from one another. So at the end of the semester, I got a hang of it. But at the beginning, that was definitely my hardest class. I ended up making an 89 in that class as well as fundamentals. So I ended up making a B. And for pharmacology, we did not have any other grades except exams. So I think we had like 4 exams. I think we had 4 exams, including the final, and that final was comprehensive. So I got scared because that was my hardest class, and it was just a lot of drugs that you had to know. But I feel like with you studying so much, and if you study a lot for these classes, the final being comprehensive, it's not going to be that bad. I know it sounds like it's like the worst thing ever, which honestly I thought it was too, but you'd be really surprised at how much you'd remember towards the end of the semester. It's just crazy. I would never have imagined my memory to have not failed me. That is basically all my classes. I didn't really want to touch up a lot on my clinicals on this video. I wanted to make a separate video for that, but as I mentioned previously, I did have a lab for the first month and a half, and then I had clinicals for the rest of the semester. So in that lab, basically we had checkoffs for what we were able to perform in the clinical setting, and for our first semester we were able to do wound care, nasogastric tube insertions, and medication administration. So that includes pills, and that also includes IM, sub-Q, or intradermal injections. I did not get to do any intradermal. I did get to do intramuscular, and I did get to do a subcutaneous injection, which was pretty cool for my first semester. And then on Thursdays, we basically had assessment lab. At the end of the semester, we had a final checkoffs where basically we would have to pick a random scenario. I believe you have 30 minutes in order to do it and 15 minutes to document. Let me tell you, when I did that, it was so nerve-wracking. I was shaking, I was panicking while I was in there doing my assessment. It was just so terrifying because you have a time crunch, and you would think that 30 minutes is enough time to fully assess a patient, but no, like, it flies by. Especially when you're panicking, time flies by. You have to do your vital signs, you have to have there's a part in the final checkoff where you have to meet. If you don't meet it, you automatically fail, and you have, I believe, 2 chances to take this. So thank God that I met all those that required portion, that if you fail something, then you fail the entire thing. finally, with all my classes out of the way, I'm just going to answer some of the frequently asked questions that I get. With the number one being the most common one, is nursing school hard? I think that depends on two things. One, it depends on what kind of individual you are and how fast you grasp new material. And two, how well your professor lays out the material for you. Because I feel like if you don't have a good professor, you're gonna spend all that time trying to catch up and learn that material on your own. Whereas if you have a good one, you know, you're gonna understand what they're saying in class, so that when you get home and you start studying your PowerPoints or start reading your book, it's like you recognize that information. You're like, oh yeah, I remember her talking about this, I remember her talking about that, and things like that. So it's gonna be easier for you to soak in the information, because that's what you need, honestly. Like in nursing school, you don't want to be learning things on your own. Like, you really want someone to teach you the material well. I don't think that the material alone was that hard for me to personally grasp. It wasn't that bad. What was hard for me was the amount of information that you had to know in such a short amount of time. It is just insane, everything that they want you to remember. Like, I mean, for pharmacology, you would have like, I'd say roughly about 20 to 30, anything in between there, worth of chapters of information on one exam. Like, that's a lot of chapters, that's a lot of information that you have to soak in, that's a lot of drugs that you have to know. And so that is what makes nursing school hard, along with the critical thinking, because not everybody, you know, everybody works and learns differently. So critical thinking may not be something that comes as easy to them. Definitely isn't to me. So to answer your question, yes and no. I think it depends on those two things, honestly, and it just really depends on the individual and what you consider as hard. Going on to question number 2. What about my social life? What about, you know, how time consuming is it? It is very time consuming, like extremely time consuming. I've never been busier in my life, in my entire life. This is the busiest I've ever been since I've been in school. So it is super time consuming. What I will say is that time management is key. If you can time manage, then you will be fine, and you will still be able to go out with your friends and have you time. For me personally, Saturdays, since I did complete my first semester of nursing school in the fall, Saturdays were my tailgating days, and I was like, okay, Saturdays are the days off. They're gonna be for me. I am not gonna study that day. I'm gonna give myself a break, and I actually gave it like 100% throughout the entire week, so I deserved, you know, some reward, some type of reward. And for me, it was just seeing everybody. You can definitely have a social life still. As far as it being how it used to be, probably not. It just depends on how well you time manage. And the other question that I get asked is, what is one word that describes nursing school for me? I would say overwhelming. It is definitely overwhelming. It was definitely overwhelming for me. It was just a lot to soak in such a short amount of time. And it's not like your tests are spaced out very nicely like you'd want them to. No, you'd have like 2 exams each week, or sometimes you'd have a test each week back to back, which is ideal. That happened like once. At my first round of exams were like all bunched together, so that was really hard to get around. On top of that, you have case studies for multiple classes. You have, for me, since I had clinicals, I had to do my care plan, so you had to get checkoffs completed, and you just had a whole bunch of other different small assignments that you had to get done on a certain deadline along with studying. So overall, my experience was really good. I completed my semester with 2 A's and 2 B's, which is not that bad, honestly. Getting a B in nursing school is even something to be proud of, because nursing school is hard, and nobody will understand that as much as students who are currently in nursing school. Like, I would always hear, yeah, nursing school is hard. Be like, yeah, I know, it's hard. I've done lots of hard things in my life. No, like, it's really hard. Like, you really can't even imagine how overwhelmed you're gonna feel until you actually step foot into nursing school. So yeah, that was pretty much my experience. Overall, it was pretty good. I start nursing school again in 2 weeks, so I'll probably make another video, hopefully mid-semester, so it won't be as long as this one, because this one is when the end of it all happened, and I'll probably want to post my clinical video soon, before school starts, definitely. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a big thumbs up. I wish you luck if you are planning to apply into nursing school, if you are currently in nursing school, and yeah, so bye.